intellectually, Bitcoin is the most exciting thing that's ever happened for the human species. And I think it's more than just an economic or financial paradigm shift. It's much deeper than that. It's cultural, it's sociological, it's psychological, and I think it's going to change everything in a massive way.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Noah Kaufman to the podcast. Noah is an ER doctor, Bitcoin dreamer, rock climber, burner, ninja warrior, ENFP, and co-founder and CEO of Starbot Pro. Welcome to the Bitcoin Edge, Noah.
Hi, Paula. It's a fantastic honor to be here. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm really happy to talk to you. You have a wonderful X profile and such an interesting, busy life. Tell us a little bit about yourself and being a healthy, active ER doctor.
Yeah, well, I'm about to turn 50 in March, and I've lived a really blessed life. Obviously, I worked really hard to become a physician. I always wanted to be a doctor since I was like 2 years old. And the reasons changed, and my understanding of medicine has changed along with the field changing. And now I'm, practicing full-time, board-certified emergency room physician. I do about a week straight a month of ER work, and then I'm off for about 3 weeks. And when I do the ER work, I'm kind of 24/7 for a week in a small town. It's a pretty interesting job and a great community. I started my Bitcoin journey in 2015. I was actually doing American Ninja Warrior at the time. I did about 7 seasons of Ninja Warrior. I didn't win the $1 million, but I did win some money, and it was a great experience. I made a lot of great friends, including the Ninja Godfather, David Campbell, who one late night shift we were talking, and he said, "You've got to buy some Ethereum." Ethereum was like $30 at the time, and I was like, "What the heck is that?" He's like, "Oh, get some Ethereum." I was like, "What about Bitcoin?" He's like, "No, that's over." And so I opened a Kraken account that night. I bought a bunch of Ethereum and Bitcoin, and they were both, they were cheap. Very cheap. I had no idea what I had. And I went through the typical, I went through the kind of typical understanding curve, a learning curve of adopting this kind of new philosophy of digital assets and really understand what was happening. I finally really understood after having bought and sold hundreds of Ethereum and Bitcoin. I finally understood what was happening by COVID and the COVID crash. I loaded up, which was nice. And so, I play guitar. I go to Burning Man every year for the last 10 years. I think there's a lot of problems in the world, but I'm very optimistic, and I think there's a lot of potential. And so I'm, as a healer and as a physician, I've been a very close proximity witness to the human condition over the last 2 decades of my life, and I've seen people at their worst and their best. And I think I have a good understanding of what motivates people, what makes people afraid. And I think now with Bitcoin in particular, everything's about to change. And I think that's really exciting. So that's a little bit about myself. I have a 13-year-old son. I live in Denver, Colorado. I still rock climb all the time. I don't do ninja as much anymore.
Well, I was going to ask you about rock climbing later, but let's get right into that. You said
Sure.
In a conversation we had that you actually climbed with Alex Honnold. And it's funny because I was obsessed with him and just his climbing and his ability and the sheer, I don't know what it is that took to climb El Capitan without ropes. And you obviously do something similar. And it's funny because I was obsessed. I tend to get obsessed with things. So I was watching everything on him and I wanted to understand that mindset. But then once I found Bitcoin, I've been the same way with this. So now, it's just kind of how I am. And I know not everybody's like us, but tell us a little bit about the parallels between rock climbing and Bitcoin.
Well, that's a fantastic question. And Alex, I knew Alex when he was a teenager, and growing up, I was older than him, and he would come out to our house in the Tahoe area, and stop by, and we'd all go climbing together. And he's a great guy. And I worried about him when he was doing all his incredible feats. And honestly, what he did, I think, is probably the most impressive human athletic accomplishment ever. And people might argue that, but go watch the movie Free Solo, and then let's debate it. But yeah, Alex's mindset, which I share, I not at his level, but I definitely did my share of free soloing. I free soloed a 1,500-foot climb in Yosemite called Royal Arches, which is a lot easier, but I had a moment where I was precariously close to falling 1,000 feet, and that'll really kind of wake you up. I think that climbing is very interesting because, there's an old saying, at either side of the financial world, I guess, there lies a leisure class, right? And so climbers are very happy people. They're extremely motivated and driven and purposeful. And some of the best people I've met are climbers, and I've always identified as a climber more so than being a physician. Climbing is my passion. I think Salvador Dali said, life is play, or maybe I've got the person wrong, but I think as a climber, you get to really experience life at a very fundamental level that is like asceticism, where it's you're just able to kind of subsist on living on the road on very little money. You don't care about money. You don't care about comfort. It's all about attaining the next level of climbing. And so I think that's the parallel with Bitcoin. Is in Bitcoin, there's all these tropes, right? And we're like a very meme-centric, kind of cultish, secular religion could be defined as. And we are like, okay, well, if you have chairs, then, you haven't committed to Bitcoin, because you need to sell those chairs, obviously. And you should sell every asset you have and turn it into Bitcoin. And so, if you're a true Bitcoiner, then you live that kind of like ascetic lifestyle that climbers have. Stay humble and stack sats. I think that it really kind of falls together, because a lot of Bitcoiners, they dream of a brighter future, and we dream of collectively of a better world. And that's why I say a Bitcoin dreamer. And I describe myself as such, because I think intellectually Bitcoin is the most exciting thing that's ever happened for the human species. And I think it's more than just an economic or financial paradigm shift. It's much deeper than that. It's cultural, it's sociological, it's psychological, and I think it's going to change everything in a massive way. But those are the parallels with rock climbing, and rock climbing is just plain fun. Like you meet incredible people. So just like Bitcoin, it's fun. You're always learning. You're always improving, and it's really about self-improvement and self-growth and insight. So I think that there's a lot of parallels there, which is different than, say, medicine or a lot of other pursuits that I've been a part of.
Just going back to your Bitcoin journey, you said you found Bitcoin in 2015, but when was it that you realized how deep Bitcoin was? You started out trading.
Yeah, so I was a derivatives trader. I have a Series 65, did a little financial advising for doctors in kind of 2010, 2013 range. I had heard of Bitcoin. I own physical gold and silver in a safe, because that was like the pre-Bitcoin Bitcoin. And when I got into Bitcoin, I thought the same thing everybody else did. This is silly. It's some kind of like trick or scam or Ponzi, et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't do any research, but I had 100 Bitcoin and bought and sold. I thought I was a genius for selling a bunch in 2017, making a profit. And then I didn't have any Bitcoin for a while, and then I had some Bitcoin. And then, during COVID, I think we had a lot of time. And after the 2017 kind of, run up in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and then the subsequent crash, I thought like, oh, wow, here, look, this was a scam. And that was my first cycle. And so I kind of forgot about it for a little bit. And then when I saw that it was still around during COVID, and it had gone up to like, $18,000 or whatever, and it crashed down to $3,000, I was like, holy cow, this thing is still around. And it got up like as high as when I bought it, Now it's real low. Maybe I need to like learn a little bit more about this. And so I bought like a bunch during COVID, like literally the day it crashed down to 3,000. I loaded up, and I don't think anybody bought at 3,000, but that day most buys $4,000 to $5,000. And I also actually bought a whole bunch more gold and silver. And so, which I'm actually recently divesting from. And actually it's such a pain in the ass. Like, I can't tell you how heavy this stuff is, like taking huge bars of silver and, these kilogram bars of gold and going to the dealer and like with a backpack, it like hurt my back, and you got to make multiple, like it's totally unusable stuff. It's a total relic. But anyway, I went down the rabbit hole, and, we all had lots of time during COVID. And then all of a sudden it was like, it hit me like a ton of bricks, and the hair stood up on the back of my neck. And it was like a total aha moment. And I realized that I needed to get as much of it as possible. I still didn't have all the traits of a maxi. I was still interested in a lot of the altcoins, a lot of the ideas, a lot of the innovation. I thought that there was potential everywhere. And so it took a while for me to really kind of become a maxi. And, one of the problems was I had a coin that went 1,000x, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. I put in $400, it became $400,000. And then, it slowly went down, and, I probably took out about 250 grand. And I slowly put all of that into Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I was like, I'm going to take profits into Bitcoin, and I kept it all there. I was a part of Voyager, which was like FTX, and like so many people, mine is a story where there was some tragedy as well. And I learned a very hard lesson with, and I didn't have all my digital assets on Voyager. Luckily, I did have cold storage and whatnot. I at one point I had, well over 40 Bitcoin on Voyager and lost most of that. And so, and was able to rebuild my stack. Bitcoin was 20,000 at the time. It ended up going back down to 15,000. So, now I'm finally in the place where I always should have been. Some people get it quicker than others, but I'm kind of like, a 50-year-old doctor doctors are dumb money. And so, I was just living up to the, so don't be worried out there if you've made mistakes. You're in good company, and I'm just as dumb as everybody else. But now I know, and I'm in what I think is a good place, and I'm happy. And, I still have a bunch of real estate and gold and silver. So I'm not like the same kind of maxi that everybody is. And also, since I'm 50, I'll leave Bitcoin to the future generations of Kaufmans, but I'm going to enjoy myself as well and live life and enjoy some of the benefits of having more value.
Yeah. Well, I think learning from mistakes is one of, the true signs of being smart, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm going to get to your pin tweet, but you don't talk a lot about real estate. You mentioned you do own some. Obviously, you've seen the charts where everything is falling when priced in Bitcoin. What's your reason for holding real estate?
Well, I don't think everything is about money. And I think life is about enjoyment and joy. And I like the feeling of building and owning. I don't want to rent and be someone else's, revenue stream. I want to, and I get that. Yeah. Okay. Well, why don't you just buy Bitcoin and then you just buy outright in like 4 years or whatever? And I get it, but life happens right now, and it's really easy to live in the past or live in the future. But I'm like a nower. I'm like a live in the now kind of person. So I have a cabin in Kentucky that I own free and clear. I rent it out. You can go to climbercabin.com, and you've got a hot tub, and it's in the woods, and it rents out, for a few grand every month. And it's great. And I go there in spring and fall, and I rock climb at the Red River Gorge, which is like one of the best places in the world to rock climb for beginners or advanced, everyone. And I enjoy it. I enjoy having the cabin. I get all the write-offs associated with owning a business that is the cabin. I have friends who own, and I know that cabin's going to be in my family until it's taken away from us or until somebody decides to sell it way down the line. But I bought the cabin during COVID, and it's gone up 3x. And am I ever going to sell it? No. But I paid cash for it, and if I had just bought Bitcoin with it, then yeah, I'd have more Bitcoin. But it's like we're playing a game, and people don't realize that it's so paradoxical, but even buying Bitcoin and stacking Bitcoin and watching your number go up, that's a fiat game. Okay. So I know people are going to freak out at this, but think about it. Net worth, GDP, all this stuff is measured in money. And, when you do something like go to Burning Man and there is no money and it's all gift economy and you see what humanity can be, you realize that there's more to life than money and there's more to life than Bitcoin. So while I think Bitcoin is the tool and the potential kind of salvation in a way from economic slavery and this fiat minded thinking, we live and operate in this current paradigm. And so I like owning my house. I own another rental in Georgia. I own the property in Kentucky in the Red River Gorge. And I like the way it makes me feel. And I enjoy those properties. I enjoy that being a part of life. And while I don't worry about quantum computing or the downsides of Bitcoin, I'm 50. And if I were to have everything in Bitcoin, there's unknown unknowns. You don't know what's going to happen. And if you have wealth already, then diversifying isn't a bad thing. Michael Saylor owns a lot of property and some very expensive mansions and a huge yacht. People own, like Bitcoiners who have done well, own stuff. So, if you're young and you're in your 20s and you're working hard, put all your money in Bitcoin. Take the risk. Live in an apartment with nothing, no chairs. And I love that. I love that. I would probably do that if I was 20. But I'm not 20. I make a lot of money. I can buy Bitcoin when I want. I have enough Bitcoin, honestly. And I think the feeling of do you ever have enough Bitcoin? No, you don't have that. I think that's a fiat-minded game where you're always living in the future and you're putting off materialism, which I get, but it's still part of being human, and it feels good to own things. So I spend a lot of money on non-Bitcoin items, but I also DCA $100 every day and then smash buy whenever there's a good sale. So I definitely love Bitcoin.
That sounds like a good plan to me. And I was more referring to as just an investment. But when you're enjoying the properties and you're enjoying owning it and you have enough Bitcoin, I completely understand why you do it that way.
Yeah, if anybody said, well, Bitcoin's a better investment, it has a better compounded annual growth return, and it has a better Sharpe ratio impact on your portfolio, I would say, yep, I agree completely. So a lot of money managers and now even big shops are saying, well, put 2% of your net worth into Bitcoin. My net worth is still 80% Bitcoin or 70% Bitcoin, 75% Bitcoin. So I think to most people who haven't taken on a Bitcoin standard, I'm crazy. Even though I own property and equities and gold and silver, and I'm crazy to have so much in Bitcoin. But it's because the Bitcoin has grown so much. It started off as 10 to 20% of my portfolio. It's just now it's huge. So yeah, I would never argue with someone who said you're dumb. Bitcoin's a better. It's fine. That's a decent argument, and live the way you want to. I don't look at real estate as investments for me go beyond their monetary value, and they have a psychological value and they have a stability value. They have different values. And I think eventually as we get away from the fiat mindset, the joy value is going to become more important and supplant the money value of things, whether it's measured in the ultimate yardstick, which is Bitcoin, or the moving target, which is fiat currencies or even other assets.
So I know you talk to doctors about Bitcoin. How do you talk to doctors? And then also, how do we get more into a Bitcoin mindset and away from the fiat mindset?
Right. So to preface this question and discussion. I'd say that there's more money than ever on the sidelines. There's like $7 trillion in money market funds. That's insane. About 4 trillion of that is institutional investors and companies and corporations and all that. So you've got a ton of money that's sitting on the sidelines. There's so much money in the system, it's insane. So everybody's calling for a crash. I don't know, maybe there's going to be a flash crash or like a little crash, but then where's the money going to go? It's not going to disappear. There's a ton of money sitting on the sideline waiting. It's going to flood back in. So it's going to be like COVID. It's going to be like, And so doctors have a ton of money, and doctors are generally very, very conservative when it comes to money. Most doctors are very smart, and most doctors understand that they're dumb when it comes to money. And we know a lot about medicine, and we put all our time into medicine. But we get taken in scams. We're dumb money, and we're investors because we got a ton of money. So, you throw 100K at my deal. Okay, fine, here you go. And then we lose the money. You do that a couple times, and you're like, you know what? I'm going to buy the ETFs. I'm going to do the most basic thing. I'm going to be very careful with my money, and I'm going to let it grow through the years. And there's organizations like the White Coat Investor that have been very against Bitcoin vocally for many years, for like the last 10 years, and have completely missed the boat. And so, I think very few doctors are in Bitcoin. Very few, more and more doctors are coming into Bitcoin. And I think that it's a very hard group of people to talk to because first, they don't have the time or the interest. Second, they have enough money that it's like, what I'm doing is working. Why do I need this crazy internet, magic internet money? And so it's very challenging. So I recently did a podcast with Kevin MD, who's a huge influencer, and went pretty deep into the Kaiser and the Sharpe ratio impact, and get off zero and just put 1% to 5% of your net assets into Bitcoin, which I think is a no-brainer. So we're making some inroads, and just like you and everybody else, I'm part of the Bitcoin marketing department. So I'm thinking of ways to orange pill my colleagues, and myself and another colleague, we have a Substack called Crypto Pulse, and we educate physicians in Crypto Pulse, and there's lots of memes, and it's funny, and it's educational. And, we have 600 doctor followers on there who are watching. It's a free Substack. So I'd say that it's a very hesitant group. I'd say it'll probably be the last group of people who will buy Bitcoin. But luckily, for them, they've worked hard, and our biggest investment is our education, and we can get in employment, and people always need doctors, right? So I think that it's a tough crowd. It's a tough crowd, but I am hired as a consultant to go to groups and do presentations about Bitcoin, and I do some speaking engagements, and so I've orange pilled a fair number of doctors, which is great. It's not easy.
That's awesome. I know what you mean because I grew up with somebody here, and she's a doctor in New Mexico, and she was complaining about the expense of something. I said, buy Bitcoin. She's like, no, I'm too chicken. I'm gonna send her to you. Right.
I'm too scared to buy Bitcoin, where it's like actually a safer thing than anything else you can buy, really.
Well, let's get into the orange pilling part of Bitcoin. So your pinned tweet is awesome. It says, Bitcoin philosophy: Bitcoin is not about making money or getting rich quick. These are fiat views, scarcity mentality. Bitcoin is about making the world a safer, fairer, and happier place. People don't get that. Most people view Bitcoin within the current paradigm. So explain that a little bit to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And first off, we each have 100% validity for stating our own opinion and our own subjective reasons for buying Bitcoin. And if it's to get rich, fine, I understand that. What I'm saying is that 99.9% of us grew up and live and currently live in a fiat-minded scarcity mentality where it's zero-sum gain and everything is competitive. Getting into school is competitive. You get grades. Did you get A's? You're going to get into this med school. You might get a scholarship if you did well. If you have more money, you can buy a fancier house. You can buy a Lambo. You might get a more attractive mate. You might be more attractive to the opposite sex. What's your net worth? Everything is predicated on game theory and competition right now. I think that's bad. And I think we have a moral obligation to humanity and to ourselves to envision a better life, a better version. And when I was growing up, I used to watch Star Trek. You know what they never talk about in Star Trek? Money. Nobody has money. Nobody's talking, and there's no countries. There's Earth, and everybody's on Earth. And like I think Gene Roddenberry was a genius, and I think he would have been a huge Bitcoiner. He was the creator of Star Trek, and so they're out just exploring the universe because of course we've solved all the problems of scarcity in energy and scarcity in food and wealth inequality, and all these things have been solved. And that's like the assumption going into Star Trek. I go to Burning Man every year, and guess what's also not at Burning Man? There's no money. You can't buy, well, you can buy coffee and ice, but that's like the only dirty fiat thing there. There's no commercialism. It's totally decommodified. There's zero commercial. You go there, you bring presents. So like one year I brought tennis balls that you cut a hole in them, and everybody has bicycles. And so like I would just pick up people's bicycles because they put their kickstand down, it falls into the sand. So you pick up their bike, you put a tennis ball on the bottom, and then the bike can stand. And you don't even see them. It's like, in Judaism, there's a term, I'm not religious, but tzedakah, and that's like charity, charitable giving. And there's different levels of charitable giving. And the highest level is, you give and nobody knows that you gave, and you don't get the ego hit, the dopamine hit of people knowing that you're a great person. So I think that, Bitcoin, when you think about like, oh my God, I'm going to, how much is one Bitcoin going to be worth in fiat terms? $10 million. That's that's like a trick. That's a ploy to get people in to converting into this better system. And I think this better system ultimately will be a bridge to something unfathomable. But I think that the bridge, Bitcoin is the bridge. And I think that, when we think about the transformative properties of Bitcoin, we have to realize that it's a head fake. The best way to incentivize people is to give them more credits, to give them more units so that they can buy more things, have more safety. And in a fiat-minded, current paradigm, they can be more successful, which means accumulating more units of value. So I think that Bitcoin completely flips the script, and it literally does a 180, and it turns competitive into collaborative. I think it turns game theory into what I'm writing about, what I call alignment theory, which is probably not new. Everything's postmodern. So I haven't even looked. I'm sure somebody thought of this, but so I think that it turns obviously scarcity mentality into abundance mentality, and you can keep going, down this rabbit hole. But I think it changes everything, and the real incredible thing is it changes the way we're raised, and it changes the way we think, and it changes the cages that we're put in by being a part of an economic slavery system where inflation is just like accepted as a normal thing. Inflation, in capitalism and in a fiat world makes perfect sense because you can extract as much productivity out of each worker as is possible. You don't want a doctor like me retiring when I'm at the height of my abilities when I'm 40. You want a doctor like me working until I'm 69. Imagine if I had bought Bitcoin in 2013 and I had 1,000 Bitcoin. I'd be doing medicine for free at a free clinic if I wanted to because it's a good skill, but would I be a part of generating revenue for private equity as a doctor, as like an RVU? That's how we measure. Of course, everything is, measured in terms of financial yardsticks. You want the wheels of society. You want progress. You want to keep producing. And I think that is a scarcity mentality. And I think Bitcoin changes that. And I think Bitcoin fixes.
And so that scarcity mentality comes from the fact that we have a money that is being debased and printed and that it doesn't hold its value. Is Is that what you're saying?
Um, yes and no. Actually, no. I think the money system is a derivative of the fact that energy itself is scarce and expensive. Energy and storing energy is very hard. So if you think about human beings and our development, things have happened like this. Like if you look at a clock, it's 11:59 and 55 seconds or whatever it is. So like we've only been around a very short period of time. And for most of our existence, our brain has evolved to think, holy crap, winter's coming. We need to stockpile stuff, food, warmth, and by the way, they're going to come into our cave and take it all, this other rival tribe, and we're going to die. And so we need to make weapons. We need to build. It's all competitive. They're going to come eat us and eat all of our food and take our women and children. So there was a time when things were very, very scary. And that's like how it's been for 40,000 years or 100,000 years. That's how it's been. And in the last couple hundred years, it's become safer and safer. But our mentality has still been hoard, 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 and look, I'm a free market capitalist, whatever, but do people really need $400 billion? And yeah, maybe you can use that money and make rockets and go to Mars. And this is not a dig at Elon. I think he's amazing. He deserves his money. And in the current system, it's set up to create these people who propel us forward and drag us forward. But I think that the fiat money system is a derivative of the fact that energy is scarce, and energy being scarce is the reason that we've developed into a competitive people. Because if energy was ubiquitous, we would have no reason to fight or hoard, or you could have anything you want. You could have as much food as you want. It even draws into question whether money is even necessary if you have cold fusion and unlimited energy, because then, why even bother? And I think that's what Jeff Booth is saying with his argument, and Price of Tomorrow, everyone needs to read. But his argument that technology is deflationary and it's taking jobs away, and it's creating abundance, and the inflationary monetary system can't keep up because that was based on scarcity. And I think he's absolutely right. I think there's a lot to be built on his body of work, and that's part of what I'm doing is some derivative building on Jeff's stuff. I don't know if anything's completely original anymore, but that's what I'm working on in my book.
But wouldn't you say that energy from the sun is abundant, and wind energy, if we start using the renewable energy, there's abundant energy, and Bitcoin tends to chase now the most inexpensive energy?
Yeah, those assertions are exactly right. And I would add to that, though, that even though the sun's energy is abundant, we are not even close to harnessing, 1% of it. And, I think there's that interesting Kardashev scale where you talk about societies that utilize a certain percentage of their planet's energy and their stars' energy. And, we're like microorganisms. Like we barely use energy efficiently. You think of a motor or an engine and how efficiently it uses energy. Most of our energy is wasted. Energy costs money to produce. We're not at a point where I'm talking about, a point where where you put in 1 joule and you get out 2 joules. We're putting in 1 joule and we're getting out less. So that's why we need to work. You think about all the work that we're putting in and how much work it takes to create energy. Well, if you want to create wind farms and solar, then you've got to mine the materials out of the planet to buy these things, and then you got to use gasoline to ship them on trucks to the wind farm. Then you got to hire people to build them, and you got to feed the people, so you got to grow the food. And the energy it takes to make a wind farm, if you're thinking net, we're nowhere near a point where we have efficient energy. And yes, Bitcoin chases all these forms of energy, but I think in the future, when we have cold fusion and all these incredible, miraculous things, we'll look back and it'll be like right now we're in the caveman era, and it's a time before antibiotics, for example, where people died of the plague. if you come to me with the plague right now, I'll give you penicillin and you'll be fine. It's like not even it's like, oh, you got the plague? Yeah, we see a couple of cases a year. It's like not a big deal. Here's some penicillin. Just rest up. You'll be fine. So the plague is very rare. I don't see a couple of cases a year, but in the world, like there's still cases. So I think that, yeah, the money system itself is all a derivative of the scarcity of energy. And I think that will change with AI and technology. And then Bitcoin is the kind of the saving grace, the bridge that takes us from, 0 to 1. And I think we're still at 0.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was also thinking about, in the West, most Bitcoiners are still using it as a store of value rather than a medium of exchange. Do you think eventually it will have to become a medium of exchange for Bitcoin to be successful?
Well, I don't think there's really stopping Bitcoin outside of something that we really don't know, or an asteroid or something. So, okay, I think that Bitcoin's success will mean that Bitcoin is worthless. And this is a powerful idea that I don't think anyone's talking about, and I'm writing about this. But, and people might be like, well, hold up. But, and I don't want to go too deep into this because I talk about this quite a bit in the book. But I think that Bitcoin may become a monetary unit of exchange. Certainly I like Jeff's term of ossification of these systems and protocols, and especially like Lightning and SegWit and Taproot and whatnot. And so I think as we move forward, the technology is going to improve, custody is going to improve, all these solutions are going to improve. I think that probably it will become more of a unit of exchange. You'll have, just like Venmo on your iPhone, I think hard wallets will be built into all of these. That's partly what I'm doing with my startup. But, I think that Bitcoin will go through that period of time. However, that might be a very long ways off. I have no idea. It's hard to prognosticate. And I think right now, Bitcoin is being used as a very successful store of value. I think it's hard to have a unit of exchange that is so volatile and fluctuates so rapidly against fiat systems. And one could argue that Bitcoin is stable and that it's the fiat that's changing so rapidly. And I understand that. But I think that we're going to have to achieve hyper Bitcoinization for Bitcoin to really supplant all of the other money systems and become the unit of exchange. I'm hopeful that happens sooner than later. I don't know. But I think that these things move at like a glacial pace, and a lot can happen. But again, I think that even if it is used as a monetary unit of exchange, even that is a temporary solution to the problem, which is that we're still valuing our time and productivity based on scarcity mentality.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Back to your pinned tweet, part of the tweet, later in the tweet, you say that the money systems are inflationary because they are a way of controlling the masses, a form of slavery, and that Bitcoin is a way out of that fiat slavery system.
Yeah.
Quickly stores value. So that's what you're saying with that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, Saylor has done a great job of showing the technical wizardry and magic and of Bitcoin as an engineering tool for hope and freedom. And he's done a great job of that. And I've learned a lot from him. And we're all kind of standing on the shoulders of giants here and building each other's up and building each other up and really thinking through this together. And, what are the ramifications of this? When you invent fire, you got to sit around and think, oh, this is incredible. Now it keeps us warm at night, but what else can we do with this? And guess what? You can make satellites and you can go to the moon and you can make computers and you can watch TV and you can, that's because of fire, right? That's because Prometheus gave us fire, or what, like lightning struck and we found a branch and we're like, holy cow. So I think, each of the Bitcoin philosophers, as it were, like the apostle, is focusing on a slightly different area of what are the applications and ramifications of this. And so from a scientific, mathematical engineering perspective, Saylor, he's just I mean, the dude is a super genius, and I think he's a hero, and he's ballsy. He's very ballsy, and I respect it. He's like a free soloer, so I totally get it. I'd love to party with that guy. But so I think that when you talk about a money system right now that's based on scarcity and Bitcoin being a life raft, which is kind of the metaphor that Saylor uses, he talks about like a melting ice cube and your money is worth less and less. And that is all the outcome, I think, of the basic issues, which are, and I think Jeff gets closer to this discussion, which is that everything is predicated on progress. Because we need as much stuff to protect ourselves from the other tribe and from the winter that's coming, or the meteor, or whatever it is, the bad thing that's coming. We need safety, we need security, and we're very pessimistic. And so we need to be as productive as possible. And the best way to do that is to keep people working on the factory line. And so if you just take their money away a little bit every year, and they're making less and less every year, and then you tax them, and you hidden tax of inflation, you take more tax, and you're always taking their money away, then they always have to work. And they've got the same scarcity mentality that you do. So this is like a deep-rooted psychological, I'd call it mass hysteria, mass psychosis. And, and then you wonder why kids grow up to be serial killers, or why people become thieves, why people kill each other, sure, there's mental health considerations, but outside of that, so much of this is attributable just to our scarcity mentality. And I think technology, more than anything, is going to help us change that, but there's growing pains, and Bitcoin is the bridge that helps take us from that scarcity mentality, from game theory to alignment theory, and changes everything in profound ways that usher in an era of abundance and human creativity and exploration that is mind-boggling. We're going to live to be 500 years old. I mean, probably we'll cure cancer in the next 10 years, many forms of cancer, or make it something that you just live with your whole life. So, AI just figured out how to fold proteins based on a genetic sequence, on its RNA sequence. And that translation is something that has evaded us forever. And now that it explodes a whole new area of drug making, and then material science with AI. I mean, all of this stuff is like it is so exciting to be alive right now. And we no longer need slavery. It's like a vestige of that scarcity mentality. So we're in this paradigm shift, and Bitcoiners are like the Sooners. They're like the first across the finish line, and they're like, come on, guys, it's amazing. Come, let's do this. And everybody's like, yeah, I'm gonna what are you doing over there? Like, this is where it's safe and comfortable, and I'm gonna pay taxes, and inflation. And this is the way it's always been. The Lindy effect is very strong. The way it's always been, it takes a real free spirit and adventurer to cross that line and to go from 0 to 1 and say, guys, there's this possible utopia over here. And I think a lot of it is, I made another post about personality types. And so I think a lot of it is personality types, and that's very interesting as well for our marketing department to think about. And I've been doing some research and thinking there as well, but I digress.
Well, on your X, it says that you are a extroverted, intuitive, feeling, perceiving, and that's ENFP. That's a
ENFP.
Right. So how does that relate to Bitcoin and being one of the people who takes the bridge first? I love that. The bridge to.
Yeah, Terabithia, I guess. It's huge. It's huge. People don't realize. Well, first, personality theory and study is a soft science. It's very hard whenever you're talking about the mind, and people rightly point to all kinds of research that says, look, personality, all these personalities are kind of hocus pocus, and there's certainly, you might as well be doing horoscope. I disagree. And as a physician and an entrepreneur and a 50-year-old human being who has spent a lot of time with other people at their best and worst, is also, I'm a lover. I've dated extensively, and I love people, and I have best friends, and I love all people. And so I will tell you that the 16 personalities that are outlined in the Myers-Briggs, the MBTI, you can go to like freepersonalities.com and do a little test, and you can do bigger tests, and you can see what your personality type is. And so there's 16 personalities, and there's all kinds of compatibility charts. It's like ENFP, my natural best friend, if it's a guy, or soulmate, if it's a woman, is like INTJ or INFJ or INTP. I get on with really well. And so these are very useful, because then if you go and you read about the personality types, you're like, wow, that is me. That totally nails me. Like, it gets me in a box, and that's what my personality is. So I'm very extroverted, and some of these things are, they're just observations of very basic things. Like, do you get energy from staying at home and reading a book, or do you like to go to a party? And now, are they scientific? Do they pass scientific muster? In a lot of ways, they're not great. But from like a psychological perspective or interacting with people, if you know their personality type, then you can know a lot about them by reading about that personality type. It's not like a horoscope, which is the stars were aligned and, it's a total guess and just populism. Well, the interesting thing is, and I've posted this graph, and again, this is thanks to other Bitcoiners who have done the research and posted this. But if you look at the graph for Bitcoin, and I'm going to pull it up so that I make sure, right? Look at all Bitcoiners and where their personalities fall into. Okay, most Bitcoiners are INTJ, 29% of the Bitcoin population. And again, this is
tell us what that stands for.
So E is extroverted, I is introverted, and then there's sensing and perceiving. There's judging. This is a long conversation, a whole podcast by itself. Just go look up Myers-Briggs if you're interested in this stuff. Suffice it to say that each personality type is its own force to be reckoned with, and some are creators, some are leaders, some are the kind of the silver-souled defenders, the honorable warriors. And so if you look at most Bitcoiners, they're INTP, ENTP, INTJ, ENTJ, INFJ, and I've posted the chart, but this is somebody else's chart, and this is what the chart looks like, and I'll repost it on X. But what's interesting is, and this is fascinating, is 0% of Bitcoiners are these two personality types. 0% are ISFJ, and maybe there's 1 in 1,000 or whatever, but ISFJ and ESFJ, okay? 0%. So like if you look like most Bitcoiners, and right there at the top, ISFJ and ESFJ, 0% of Bitcoiners. And yes, let's redo the study and let's make sure it's properly powered. But this is a good predictor of a future study. And the interesting thing is ISFJ and ESFJ, there's a preponderance of those personality types who are politicians and CEOs. Okay. And that's why I'm curious. I think Saylor is probably an INTJ, which is the most common personality type for Bitcoiners. But a lot of CEOs and politicians are these exact personality types that are more rooted in conservatism and control and kind of like, and so I think that we could think about this in the marketing department, and the low-hanging fruit would be to try and convert more of these CEOs and politicians by kind of changing our messaging from the echo chamber, which right now appeals to the INTJs and INFJs of the world, and appeals more to these other personality types. And honestly, I think it's interesting. It's philosophically and psychologically interesting, but I think we're approaching critical mass and tipping point to where this was a question that was more fascinating, interesting, and would have been more helpful in the previous cycle.
So do you think there's a spiritual side to Bitcoin?
Yes, absolutely. I think Bitcoin is a secular religion that is a decentralized religion that, whether or not that is non-theistic, like you can believe in God personally or not believe in God, and that doesn't really matter. But I think just like a lot of religions are cultural, there's a very cultural component. But the spirituality in Bitcoin is intense, right? Like it could be defined as a secular religion. It has a founding figure shrouded in mystery. Satoshi is this like quasi-mythical figure who's anonymous, and these writings are foundational texts. There's these sacred texts, the white paper, and these related documents that we like revere. There's these rules, I guess, immutable rules, like commandments almost. There's the blockchain, but it's all predicated on math and science and truth. I had a great discussion last night with a bunch of Bitcoiners about the philosophy of religion, and Alan, the pastor, co-hosted it with me. And he's Christian, and I respect everyone's beliefs. And and Christianity makes up 31% of the world. And my argument is that centralized religions, there's 4,000 or give or take religions. Christianity is the biggest one. It makes up 31% of the population. Look, I mean, hundreds of wars have been attributed to Christianity, and estimates of 50 to 60 million people dead. Again, and some of it's real estate, and this is my holy land, this is your holy land. But I asked him, well, I'm not an atheist, I'm agnostic. I just think I'm so small, I just don't think I can know. So if anything, I'm a Bitcoinist. My religion is Bitcoinism, right? Maybe Buddhism, but I think I'm just a grain of sand or a fleck of dust in a celestial ocean. And what can I really know? And so I don't even think it's worth arguing about the existence of God or that sort of thing. But what I do know is religion, if there's 4,000 of them and they're centralized and they cause war and they're based on Fiat, like a scarcity mentality, and this is going to maybe offend people, but I think you could start comparing religions to altcoins, and are they necessary? Or can we supplant those religions with a decentralized secular Bitcoinism? And so, okay, like I know that's going to go crazy, and maybe there's a God, maybe it's a Christian God, maybe it's a triomni God. I don't know. I don't really care. Maybe this is all a simulation. Like I'm kind of leaning more that way. And then, is there a base layer or is it recursive? I don't know. But the fact of the matter is there's a lot to discuss here. There's a lot to unpack. I think that the ultimate goal should be to reduce the number of wars and fighting, which are all fiat-minded competitive game theory questions. And I think that religion has served its purpose. And there's a secular, now spiritual, decentralized option, which is Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful. So speaking of altcoins and your business, which is Starbot Pro, right? Which actually invests, it helps people trade in Ethereum. Tell us how that works.
Well, I agree with a lot of Bitcoin maxis. I think all altcoins are going to zero, gold and silver included. I think, real estate will all be tokenized. And I think that Ethereum and these 10,000 altcoins are all going to zero. So first and foremost, let me say that unless you're a degenerate gambler and you want to go to Vegas and gamble, which I think is fine, and I think it's fine to gamble on altcoins. I think that people make the argument, well, you're supporting a system that's not Bitcoin and it's eventually going to zero anyway. Well, yeah, but you also go to Vegas to gamble to get that dopamine hit. And look, people are going to live their lives. And reality has shown us that whether or not this is like the perfect ideal thing to have all these altcoins, they do exist and there is a market. And the way I think about altcoins is this is a huge idea factory that is all accretive to Bitcoin. I think it's a place to experiment and innovate, and everything can be done on Bitcoin on its meta layers. I think the meta layers of Bitcoin will produce anything good that comes from the altcoin experiment as these things all go to zero. I think it will take a long time for these things to go to zero, and I think there will be winners, and there will be short periods of time where the entropy of the altcoin world, which is all disorder, is increasing and they're all going to zero. I think that there's a period of time where some will do very well. And people, whether we like it or not, you can tell people don't trade altcoins, but they're going to. So my startup, Starbot Pro, look, I lost a lot of money in Voyager. But I've always invested. I've always been a gambler. I've always loved gambling. My dad used to roll out the craps table when we were kids. I have two younger brothers. We play poker. I've always played No Limit Texas Hold'em. I love it. It's so much fun. Is that good for Bitcoin? Like, no. Like, I should be stacking sats with that money, and I should be like a perfect a sat stacker. And like, no, that's not life. Life is gambling. Life is risk. Life is fun. And so, hey, beautiful. This is
Oh, how beautiful.
Moxie.
She's
Yeah,
missing you
she's
because
adorable.
we're over an hour right now.
Well, so I'll jump to it, but these altcoins, they are an idea factory. I think people are going to do them. I think it's better to embrace everyone instead of the have fun staying poor mentality. And if you're not a maxi and Bitcoin only and you're like a Bitcoin Nazi, I mean, like it just doesn't make sense because it doesn't comport with reality. And reality is there's altcoins, tons of them, and they have a huge market capitalization. So the way I approach it is I lost a ton of money, on Voyager, and good, everybody deserves that who gets it, not your keys, not your cheese. I wanted to create a non-custodial MetaMask type product that was, MetaMask is difficult to use and you got to sign things and you're worried about getting scammed. You have to import tokens. You got to do all this crap. But we're automating all of it with AI, and we're making it much like Voyager, which was so simple to use, and it was a good interface. I mean, nobody will argue that. But it was centralized and it was risky, and it ended up blowing up. So we're making a non-custodial, so a self-custody solution that has Bitcoin and has all these altcoins. And so if you're going to do it, you're going to do this stuff, you should learn about self-custody. You should still be storing in Bitcoin. And I think that this should be an education so that as you watch your coins go to zero, or maybe you make 100x on this coin, at least you take profits into Bitcoin, and it's an education and a way for, and then a lot of the reward system that we're generating reward people for stacking sats. And a lot of the education is, look, while you're playing with these ideas and these innovations, all these things will be done on Bitcoin. And so a lot of the articles and a lot of the work that we're doing is going to be to head fake all these shitcoiners into Bitcoin because it exists, whether or not we like it. And so I think that being elitist and being Bitcoin only, it's fine. And you'll be a part of that 1,000 people that are Bitcoin ultra maxis and like Orthodox religion. And I get it. And my heart and soul is there with you. But reality is that there's this market. And I think that if we say, okay, well, fine, you want to dabble and gamble, these things are going to zero. Here's the education. Go to hope.com. Let's learn together. Okay, you made some money. Now sell that crap and buy Bitcoin. And your goal should be to amass as much Bitcoin as you can. And so we made a startup. We raised $350,000. We had a Telegram trading bot, and now we're launching an app, and we're just about to raise more money in our Seed Plus round. And people are really excited about it. And I get it if there's Bitcoin only people who are upset about that, but you can't argue with reality, and the reality is it's an idea factory and people are innovating. And yes, it will probably all be redone on Bitcoin and all these coins will go to zero. So I think that I'm helping people find Bitcoin who think that they're doing the right thing by investing in altcoins. Personally, when I talk to people, and if you look at everything I write about on X, it's all about Bitcoin. And I think Bitcoin is fire. Bitcoin is the wheel. Bitcoin is the invention. And all these derivative altcoins are experimentation and a fascinating look at models of how do we use Bitcoin ultimately. Yeah, I had a philosophy professor who used to say, it's funny how when you're skating on thin ice, you can end up in hot water. So I think that's what I'm doing. I've always been a risk taker and a gambler at heart. And so I have a portfolio of altcoins because it's interesting. I'm 90%, I got 90% of my digital asset allocation in Bitcoin. But am I going to play a little bit? Yeah, yeah, it's exciting. It's an exciting time. And if it all goes to zero, like I'm fine with that. I don't need the money. If you're trying to like make money and you care about the money aspect of it, don't buy altcoins. Like buy Bitcoin and chill. And that's all you need to do, and wait and stack sats and stay humble. So that's what I would say about that.
I think you covered that very well. With 10%, with money you're willing to lose, and everybody has their own journey, and it's part of the journey. So I think it sounds very interesting. So for our last
Thank you, Paula.
question, just tell us how Bitcoin has changed you.
That is a great question. Well, I came into Bitcoin, when I was about 40. So about 10 years ago now. And I think Bitcoin has not changed me like at my core. I think I've always been Noah. I've always been fascinated by self-actualization and becoming the best authentic version of myself. So I don't think Bitcoin has changed who I am, but what it has done is it's given me hope. And it's given me an idea that all of the messed up things in the world may not continue forever. And my son might have it much better than, well, I had it pretty good. Okay. But our children might have it much better net on net than we had it. And I think that I'm optimistic that people who are being taken advantage of, which is like 90% of the world, there's huge wealth inequality, there's huge problems. And I think Bitcoin fixes this. And I'm not into socialism or communism per se, or capitalism per se, but I have a new term in my book that is called energism, and I'm into a more egalitarian distribution of happiness and safety and security. And it's going to take a long time to get there, but I think Bitcoin is the bridge that gets us there. And so Bitcoin has maybe not changed me, but it's augmented me by giving me hope that we can really achieve that utopian Star Trek future where we're off and multiplanetary and we're off into outer space and we're all focused on making life better for the lowest common denominator, and nobody's hungry and there's no wars and there's no cancer. And like, imagine if we took the human potential and we stopped screwing it up. I mean, look at what we do now. So, and people have to break backs to become billionaires, and they're stepping on others. And so, I think there's elements of all these political systems and money systems that have good intentions. And I think, Naval, or I don't know how to pronounce Naval's name, but Naval said it really well. And I think he was even maybe partially quoting someone else, but, at the family level, like you should be like a communist, and at the like friend level, like a socialist. And then as you move up, you should become like capitalist. And the bigger the group, the different system that maybe you need to govern that group, that makes more sense. And I think that's a very interesting way to think about it. And I think the ultimate goal, though, is making all of humanity our family, like actually, like, because we all are family and we are all brothers and sisters. And if you can't find love in your heart for everyone, and you can't become aligned with incentives to try and make this world a better place for everyone and be compassionate to the lowest common denominator and remove all suffering, then what are we really doing? Like, we're just hoarding value units. So Bitcoin gives me hope. And I think that before Bitcoin, I was becoming more and more jaded and cynical about our future and worried. Now, I think that there's a clear path towards harmony and happiness for all of humanity. And I'm really excited to be a part of that, and really excited to be part of the Bitcoin marketing department.
Well, I love that. And just makes me think we're all connected, and it's just so wonderful to hear your thoughts on this. And I think your book's going to be a wonderful addition from another perspective. So I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you, Paula. Yeah, I'm excited to get it out there and share some novel ideas. And after the book is out, I'll be able to talk a lot more about the basic premise of the book. All these things are somewhat peripheral to some of the central tenets of the book. So I think the book is going to define some new terms and open up a new area for discourse that is very exciting and helps us move the ball down the court and expedite hyper-Bitcoinization and self-actualization in the process.
Wonderful. Well, where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm at Noah Kaufman MD on X and Instagram. So it's NOAHKAUFMAN MD, just one F, one N in Kaufman. And or you could Google me, search YouTube for Noah Kaufman, American Ninja Warrior, and you can see me running around in a gold suit on TV. But I'm all over the internet. You can find me. Come to Burning Man and find me, and we'll dance all night and watch the sunrise and exchange dusty hugs.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Paula. It was a pleasure, and looking forward to having more discussions with everyone in the Bitcoin space.